Welcome to episode 13. I started numbering episodes just because I saw Tommy podcasting. He's got like 2,000, hit the 2,000 mark. And I was just like, you know what, maybe I should start numbering these things and try to be a bit more professional or whatever. So as usual, we will start the show with the recent thing of like trying to get Grok to AI me a script for the show. And as usual, we will have to use the powers of our imagination to, as I don't have any of the stuff that Grok will suggest that I do, as images and reels and all that kind of stuff. That would be really cool if I knew how to do any of that stuff. And maybe when I go to England and hang out with my friend Steph, who has like a giant channel, she can show me how to do some of these more neater things. So anyways, here we go. Yep. Style: urgent shadow spy thriller narration, visuals, green night vision filter, maps with red classified overlays, split screen drone missile footage, chess pieces for realist metaphors, quick cuts to Trump Netanyahu statements of oil prices, graphs, and your spy guy. Stop doing the spy guy gear, Grok? This is supposed to be realist foreign policy, which I did tell it. But for some reason, it's still, Grok thinks that I have some sort of giant amount of stuff on it, that I have all this spy gear that I'm trying to sell. I'm not. I'll have to trim that in a future episode. Anyways, agent reporting in. This is Fade from Black. You in Fedora's shadow, green lamp on desk, tense orchestral sting. Agent reporting in. This is Spyguy. Your eyes in the shadows while the world spins. Headlines. It is the 2 days, March 26, 2026, day 27 of the U.S.-Israel war on Iran. Israeli strikes just took out the IRGC Navy commander and his intelligence chief. Really good, important people. Trump is hammering Tehran to get serious on a 15-point ceasefire or face even harder hits. And Iran is supposedly rejecting the deal outright, fired back at Israel now, charging ships to cross the Strait of Hormuz. But as we've been learning, it may or may not be Iran. A lot of people are speculating this is all warlordism now, that like my friend Kelly, I did an interview a week or two ago, and she's been pointing out that because she's a real shipping nerd, and she basically pointed out that when the guys who said that we can get you through the Strait of Hormuz said we don't actually control all the other guys. So if you pay us $2 million, we won't shoot at you, but we can't guarantee you anyone else won't shoot at you. So yes, so that's kind of fun. This isn't about democracy, human rights, or a feel-good ideal. This is raw power politics, the kind realists have warned about for decades. States acting in their national interest, no morality, just survival. Pretty much, like that's the end of on February 24th, 2022. The end of history restarted, is what I like to say. If you think this stays over there, you're wrong. Your energy prices, supply chains, and digital privacy are already in the crosshairs. Stay sharp. This is your classified realist briefing. And yeah, just basically, I want to say this. I don't think this is not going to affect America much. This is affecting Europe badly. And I think this is all about, a lot of this is putting pressure on Europe by attacking Iran in order to get Europe to come to the table on things like the Ukraine war. You can't continue the war in Ukraine what's your priority? British old ladies freezing to death in apartments, or Zelensky in Ukraine? So yes, there we go. Before we go dark, smash subscribe and ring the bell. We cut through the spin with straight realist analysis and test the gear. Stop talking about the gear. Today we're dissecting the biggest geostrategic flashpoint on the planet right now and why you should care. I'm going to remind Grok that I don't actually sell spy gear here. Okay. Cut to an animated map of the Middle East. Red arrows for strikes. Live ticker of casualties, oil prices. That'd be cool. Stock of Israeli F-35s, Iranian missiles, and Hormuz tankers. That would be really cool to have all that stuff. But I need to figure out how to get Restream to run the scenes for me or do the graphics. I think it's on the paid version, but I haven't just been interested in doing that just yet. Let's get the raw intel first. Overnight, Israel accelerated a 48-hour surge, strikes on missile sites, weapons factories, and high-value targets inside Iran. Confirmed kills include the Irish Navy commander and the head of naval intelligence. Tehran's response, fresh missile and drone barrages on Israeli cities, 149 injured in the last 24 hours alone. Okay, that's tragic there. President Trump, speaking from the White House, says Iran is begging for a deal so badly, but too afraid to admit it. And then it might be something to it. A lot of people will talk that Trump is, I've always compared him to Latin American machismo, but Persians are famous for their machismo as well. Just look at Patrick Bet-David on Valuetainment. His sidekick, Adam, went on Piers Morgan and got just utterly destroyed by Dave Smith. And the problem is that people don't realize what Adam's job on PBD is. He's the court jester. His job is there to make literally Patrick Bet-David look smarter in comparison. That's why he's around. He's that, you have, if you want, it's like kind of like James Bond in Roger Moore's James Bond, when he was in his last movie, where they brought on an even older agent to make him look better in comparison. So there's these tricks we do out there that you'll notice in the line. So Adam's job is to be Patrick David's court jester. Speaking from President Trump, speaking from the White House, says Iran is begging for a deal so badly. Yeah, I just said that. No talks, and Tehran's foreign minister called the 15-point U.S. ceasefire proposal one-sided and unfair. Well, this is war, baby. What did you think? Delivered through Pakistan and other back channels. Yeah, Pakistan's doing all the work. There was something someone pointed out the other day. Notice that there's no British foreign ministers wandering around running the show here. There's no foreign counsels from the Brits who actually ran this area of the world for like 150 years, and we're doing it from the shadows. Now, none of them are there. No one from Chatham House is helping out on this because they're at war with Trump. Meanwhile, the Pentagon is moving 2,000 more, 82,000. Yeah, I covered that yesterday, to the 50,000 already there. Oil prices are spiking again. Actually, they kind of came down last time I checked. Iran is now demanding fees from ships transiting the Strait of Hormuz, the first real test of their closed strait threat. Russia is quietly shipping drones and supplies to Tehran per Western intel. I don't believe that's happening. I think my sources indicate that Russia is staying this one out of this. They have every interest in seeing the Ayatollahs go away as much as the United States, especially since it was IRGC-backed rebels that caused Chechnya against them for so long. So alliances are temporary and ephemeral in the realist world. This is not slowing down. It's a race. Israel and the U.S. trying to grade Iran's capabilities before any ceasefire sticks, while Tehran tries to inflict enough pain to force better terms. Classic realist escalation. I'm going to take water because that was a lot of talking. Segment 2, realist foreign policy lens. Why this is happening. Chessboard visuals. I don't like chess. I think it's a stupid game. That's why all the grandmasters are 12-year-olds. Split screen. U.S.-Israel flags versus Iran, Russia, China. Text overlays. Anarchy, self-help. National interest at first and balance of power. Just going to see. Yeah, I do have my usual one listener in. What is it? Sorry, let me get back to the script here. Now, the realist perspective, no illusions, no virtue signaling. In international relations, the system is anarchic. No world cop. States must secure their own survival and power. That's it. For the U.S. and Israel, Iran nearing nuclear breakout was an existential threat. A nuclear Iran changes the entire balance of power in the Middle East, though I didn't think they were actually going to break out and create nuclear weapons. I think they just wanted a threat. They were trying to not go full North Korea without that thing. They were just like, they're doing the North Korean thing of like, hey, give us money or we'll saber rattle more. Nuclear Iran changes the entire balance of power in the Middle East, threatens Saudi Arabia, the Gulf states, Israel's existence, and U.S. energy security. Preemptive strikes to destroy that capability. It's pure realist logic, national interest, no ideology. Yeah, that's what I go for. Also, in a nuclear armed Iran, you know that Saudi Arabia was next on the chopping block. And I've had good rumor. I've always heard the rumors that Saudi Arabia has nukes. There's a half dozen countries around the world that people believe, my contacts in the military industrial complex really believe are nuclear powers. Trump's approach has been, including Taiwan, which is one reason why I don't think Taiwan wants to invade Taiwan, because if I'm hearing that they have nukes, what are they hearing? Trump's approach, a maximum pressure plus an off ramp. It's textbook realism. Use force to prove your bargaining position, then cut the best deal possible. No endless nation building, no forever wars. Iran side, they're playing the same game. Acts as a resistance with Russia and China backing them. I say I don't believe Russia's doing it. They kind of pulled the 1914 thing that Italy did, where they said, hey, terms of this contract says we don't have to do any of this stuff. Because we can use the Middle East helps Beijing's Taiwan ambitions and Moscow's Ukraine position. They're not evil. They're rational actors maximizing their power in a dangerous neighborhood. Intelligence failures cut both ways. The West underestimated Iran's ballistic missile stockpiles and drone production. Tehran underestimated how fast Israel and the U.S. would go kinetic once the red line was crossed. Right? Bottom line, agents, this war is about spheres of influence, energy choke points, and preventing nuclear threat points. Morality is the history book. It is for the history books. Power is what decides outcomes. Absolutely. So, going on to my gear table. Quick demo, scanning phones. I don't have any of that stuff, Grog. I really need to tell you to stop me. I don't sell spy stuff. Okay, how does this touch your life? Economic shockwaves, volatility remains high, means higher gas, groceries, plastics, even medicine. Global supply chains are already routing, though America's got plenty of oils, and that's the thing. I think this is, a lot of people are saying this is about breaking the Brent contract and making WTI the new gold standard. Why the hell should the UK still get to decide the price of oil? Cyber and espionage explosion. State actors like Iran, Russia, China are ramping up phishing, malware, and accounts takeovers on Signal, WhatsApp, and Telegram. The FBI warned this exact scenario weeks ago. Your data is leveraged. That's true, but I'm not too sure. I think that's just a lot of we're the FBI. We want to contribute to the war effort. Surveillance everywhere in a hot conflict. Governments and adversaries deploy more trackers, hidden cams, and hotels, Airbnbs, and signals intelligence. Travelers and even home offices are targets. What do you do? Oh, VPN and 2FA everywhere. God, I don't have any of this stuff that you're trying to make me sell there, Brock. This isn't paranoia. In the realist world of constant great power competition, your pride is your personal sovereignty. Outro call to action, back to desk, make music shifts to Resolute Spy theme. I should ask him to create a Resolute Spy theme. That's the realist take on today's biggest geostrategic event. Day 27 of the Iran War, power politics in action. No heroes, no villains, just state fighting for position. Drop your question below. Realist predictions for next week. Like, subscribe, share with your network. Knowledge and right tools are your best defense. Okay, that was pretty good. I'm going to then now shift the program over to Crypto Rich's I'm going to share the latest one from him. It's a rather interesting thing about. It gets into a lot of the coups and color revolutions and how they operate and who's running them. So why don't we all share and we can all start watching.
These globalists are really, really smart, insidious, and devious. There's all the stuff they do on the surface, but then there's what they do that's hidden from our view, and sometimes it's right underneath our noses. That's what we're going to talk about in this video. Hey, Roxanne, thank you so much for making yourself available.
Sure, I'm happy to be here.
Yes, and I'm happy to be for you to be here and for me to learn off you. And you talked about this operative who did stuff out in the open,
Yes.
but nobody knows about him, and including instigating revolutions.
Yes. And I have found over the course of the years that I've been researching this, there's a lot of these people and they show up over and over again, but no one understands the overarching network and how it works. The fact that we talked about when I was on with you before, how there's this international syndicate that coalesces with kind of directives to all of the connected intelligence agencies. And when they want to overthrow a country, they either for resources or because we voted the wrong way or whatever, they have an entire toolkit of operatives that they can mobilize in all of the different sectors, economically, politically, and paramilitarily, and they will bring all of these forces to bear. So when I was doing that research, I'm always looking for the person whose name no one knows, and a guy by the name of Gene Sharp.
Now, I haven't heard of this guy before, but I've seen a lot of this kind of stuff. I watch, my friends have a channel called America's Untold Stories. And on that channel, they cover a lot of the CIA stuff from back in the 60s and 70s around JFK. Mark Rubert, who's one of the hosts on the show, is literally was a researcher on JFK, the movie. So he's got a lot to a knowledge of the tracking this down. And this is really where we've started unraveling the CIA role, and that's how people. Tucker Carlson's how the hell did these people know my father was in the CIA? They've been the JFK conspiracy guys have been backtracking throughout all these people and figuring out who every player is in the CIA in the community. Though it's also interesting, there's a book, I read Oleg Kalugin's book. He was a KGB general and assistant to aide to Andropov when he was running the KGB. And he said, the problem was I actually created a book with every single CIA asset that we knew about. And I wanted to publish it, but Andropov thought it was too escalatory. So that's some interesting history there when you read about these kinds of things.
Came to my attention. I had never heard of him. And so I started doing quite a bit of research on him. And for your audience, if they want to know anything about him, his history or anything after this, watching this segment, I suggest they go to an institute called the Albert Einstein Institute. You can find it on the website. It still exists, but we're going to go into a little bit of background on Gene Sharp and how he morphed into creating the Albert Einstein Institute. Where you find him originally is he has lots of cheerleaders. For example, Noam Chomsky was one of his big cheerleaders. He compared him to Gandhi. Just because you're going to understand just how ludicrous that is in a minute.
Well, hold on a second. Excuse me. So Noam Chomsky compared this guy, Gene Sharp, to Gandhi.
Yes.
Now, just how do you spell Gene Sharp? Because both of those names can be spelled differently.
It's Gene.
Yep.
And then Sharp, Sharp.
Okay, Gene. Okay, good. All right.
Yeah. So basically, what he was.
Sorry, Roxanne. One other thing I wanted to say. So
Yeah, I agree with crypto. Sorry, on Rich on this one. Like, when I get Tom on, I'm on the Slack server. I'll reach out to Rich and see if he'll come on and help out grow this little channel, because we review a lot of his stuff, and I want to make sure I wouldn't mind meeting him and getting like, well, how's this old school lefty social worker get sucked into all this?
Noam Chomsky
Yeah.
used to be, when I was an unreconstructed old school British lefty, used to be one of my heroes because of the stuff that he wrote. I remember reading his book, Deterring Democracy. But then during lockdown, he became an advocate for forced medical interventions without consent, defying bodily consent. I'm like, oh, that's a bit Mengelian. And then also, he was connected to Epstein. Interesting.
Yes.
Yes.
Very interesting. So Gene Sharp primarily focused on U.S. activists left and social movements abroad. And he would try to capture the youth movements and basically infiltrate them and focus them on particular objectives that the intelligence agencies wanted to exploit. So he in the mid 1960s, a guy by the name of Thomas Schelling, who was a Nobel Peace Prize winning nuclear theorist, recruited him when he was 20 years old to join a thing called the Center of International Affairs at Harvard University, right? And Harvard University at the time was really focused.
Okay, well, I'm sorry. Center of International Affairs.
Yep. The Center for International Affairs. These guys can't help themselves.
Center for International Affairs.
CIA.
It actually is the CIA at Harvard. Literally the CIA at Harvard. Because you find people like Henry Kissinger.
I've speculated on this before because we see all this stuff, and especially in some of the satanic imagery stuff that shows up and different things showing up. I don't know. I think some of this is like they gain power by just being. Some of them might be just being clever dicks, and sometimes I think they're part of their. If there is this satanic conspiracy thing out there, that to make their magic work, they have to shove it in our face. So I just find it fascinating. Well, yeah, to cast their weird spells, they think this is how it works. And we'll get down into more of that stuff later.
It was literally referred to as the CIA at Harvard. Henry Kissinger, who obviously was a national security advisor, and for those of you who don't know, the national security advisor basically runs the covert operations for plausible deniability to the president. They are the pinnacle. The CIA sits in there, the State Department, blah, blah, blah. Okay. McGeorge Bundy.
Yeah, Clear and Present Danger by Tom Clancy's movie is all about that. The book is terrible. Well, the problem is the book just becomes more and more wordy. I shouldn't say it's terrible, but Tom Clancy started writing longer and longer books, and it got really, really annoying. Like Some of All Fears, the first 600 pages are boring as hell. And then you hit the last 300 pages, and I couldn't put it down to get through it so fast. It's like, why don't you just start here?
Who is a Yale Skull and Bones guy and a future...
As was George W. Bush and probably his father.
CIA chief, all was resident at this CIA at Harvard. And they bring in Gene Sharp. So that's kind of where he cut his teeth. And he was also very close to the NATO and the defense leadership in different meetings, because they would bring all the NATO leadership, both military and civilian, into Harvard, into this center for training, right? So what they do is they basically put out the persona that we're going abroad and we're instituting democracies around the world, right?
Yep.
Where none of it is about democracy. It is actually about destroying democracy, because you will have duly elected heads of state that get overthrown because they're not the right democracy. Mm-hmm. So you not only have to be democratically elected, but you also have to be one of their pawns, or that democratic election is going to be compromised. And you have no further to look than Ukraine in 2004 and in 2014. In 2004, it was a youth movement, and Gene Sharp claims credit for the boots on the ground that got out to contest. I don't know if you are familiar with the 2004 revolution that they had in Ukraine.
I'm certainly not that well aware of it, though. I have a book around here. Well, it's on Kindle, written by this Russian guy who was talking about that and how he's like the mysteries of color revolutions and how they operate and how to beat them. And Russia's certainly showing how to do that. And it's mainly, well, we'll cover that later.
Ukraine, but basically they have one of those elections that if the two people, if you don't get over 50%, you go into a runoff. And so they did that, and the non-NATO guy won that election. And so they just unleashed a Gene Sharp basic brown shirt fiasco in the streets of Kiev, demanding a third election. And it was
I remember those demonstrations. I didn't follow Ukrainian politics until the Maidan coup. Then I followed it, been following it really closely ever since. But I do remember those demonstrations. And I also remember that there were two brothers that were leaders, and one of them got poisoned or something, and his skin turned orange. So vague memory. Okay.
So this is a Gene Sharp.
Original Orange Man bad. Yeah, I really haven't paid as much attention to 2004, but I haven't noticed the trends of color revolution since really started paying attention after the invasion of Ukraine. And we got to remember there were a bunch of color revolution attempts right before then that people don't talk about anymore because, it's so far in the rearview mirror. But we have color revolutions in Serbia and all over Yugoslavia. We've seen color revolutions in Uzbekistan and Kazakhstan. I think those are the two places that Russia put down successfully. So there's a lot of these things that we are that are out there that we kind of memory hole because we got so much stuff coming at us, but you can really trace them back.
Revolution. And so they demanded the third election, which constitutionally wasn't even authorized, but they bullied the winner into accepting the third election, of which the NATO guy won. And so they had effectively overthrown the government using quote unquote democracy. And then, of course, we saw the exact same thing happen during the Maidan coup, where you had all of these people out in the streets. Gene Sharp is the guy that goes in with a team into a country and he trains these activists. And again, if you go to the Albert Einstein Institute, they brag about it. They not only brag about what they do, they have videos on their website where the leaders of these different entities are telling their story of how they did it. There's footage of them doing it in their country. It's quite shocking, but no one even has ever heard of him.
And what's the sort of mechanics? So let's say I'm a 23-year-old living in Kiev. How would I get recruited? What would I do?
Normally at the universities, but what they do is they will, most countries have some type of youth organizations, whether it be like here we have Turning Points USA, or we have Like in high school, you have Boy Scouts or whatever.
Or
They
in the
go
UK,
to
National Union of Students, which connects all the universities and is students' union.
yes, they infiltrate those with operatives so that they can start. They profile them too. So there are personalities of people based on their interests, like the gamers and stuff like that, that are much more susceptible to recruiting into these initiatives than a person that goes to church every Sunday and those types of situations. So they do the on the ground what do you call that, inserting into these different organizations to know whether or not it's going to be a fruitful recruiting pool. And then if it is, and you can find people through just casual conversation that is susceptible, because these guys are all trained in psychological operations. They know what to look for in people's personalities. That,
like John Kariakis says, they're looking for people with sociopathic tendencies, not sociopaths, but people whose tendencies, people who will default to. John has the story of he's at a thing. He was doing his training, and they were told to recruit an agent, and the agent would not. The teacher is like, what happens if the guy can't do it? And all the other students are like, well, we just try harder. We try harder. And he says, and then the teacher asks him and says, oh, well, I break into the embassy and open the safe and get the documents out. It's like, you got to have this criminal mind because, as I've said, as I like to point out, these things are criminal. All intelligence agencies are criminal conspiracies outside their home country. You have to be a criminal or a criminal mind to do these operations, right? Covert operations. So
that make them more prone to being influenced, as opposed to people who have principles and are going to look at you and go, you're out of your mind.
Right.
So
Roxanne, just to understand, I'm thinking about astroturf organizations like the BLM, like Just Stop Oil in the UK and Extinction Rebellion, that they would have been captured or manufactured this way because I'm not. I mean, I've become more aware over these years since lockdown, but there was something off to me about BLM. I was like, there was no way that this was a grassroots organization,
it
and
was not.
the same with Extinction Rebellion and Just Stop Oil. And I could tell by, for example, they'd go on their demonstrations, the Just Stop Oil people in the UK, and they're all wearing tabards. I went on anti-war demos. There was no uniform. There was no money for no organization to give us a uniform for an anti-war demo, and they all got publicity on the mainstream media, unlike
Yes.
the anti-war demos.
Yes. And those are all very perceptive signs of an organized effort to orchestrate these types of operations.
I just want to say it's very hard to do that here in Canada because what happened was in the 2015 election, the Tides Foundation tried to do, they did a demonstration run. They chose 25 ridings to do these type of, and create in a bunch of groups to support them. And then they held a press conference explaining how they did it. The problem is Canada is like pre-Blairite Britain. We don't mess around here. Our bureaucracy, our deep state, as you will, is very parochial. And Elections Canada, which would be part of this, it freaked out so badly. They threatened to, they went after all the groups. They first wanted to extradite all the Tides Foundation board members to Canada to face trial for doing it. They weren't allowed to do. The government said no, we're not going to extradite them for like something that you get. Maybe if you're lucky, you'll get them for a year in prison, right? But they had all the organizations. They went in and shut them all down, and ever since they've been on the lookout for any type of group like that. So it's very hard to do these kind of inorganic operations in Canada as a result, because Elections Canada is just looking for it, and our deep state just has this attitude still of, this is our little kingdom. Okay, we run Canada, not you outsiders. We run it, and it goes back to like the founding. A lot of people talk about the Laurentian elite, but that's actually something quite different. Uh, Ontario was run by the Family Compact, and the Family Compact guys were all these guys who had been driven out of New England after the American Revolutionary War, and they wanted to have their little piece of pure England reborn, and their own little, like, parochial interest, and they have been run, and so they are supposedly gone, but I still think they are around here. And they just look at Canada as their thing, and they don't like outsiders messing around it. They don't like foreigners messing around with it. And by foreigners, I mean Calgary.
They're well funded. They do have consistent signage. They have consistent uniforms, whether it's just T-shirts or whatever. They're very, very well organized. Where, during our lifetime, when people are genuinely upset, and you mentioned, obviously here during my lifetime was the Vietnam War. Those people were not organized. They didn't have uniform signs. They didn't have any of that. It was very organic.
Yeah, and also the anti-lockdown demos in London that I went to regularly, they got no publicities. They got larger and larger and larger. There was no uniform or anything. And at the same time, you'd have a small Just Stop Oil demo that got loads of publicity, or a BLM demo in Britain that got loads of publicity. And it was much, much smaller.
When you understand that the media is an arm of the intelligence agencies, that all makes perfect sense.
Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not independent, or they would be covering massive movements. And that is another one of those indicators when you're looking at an operation, is where is the controlled media focused and where is the independent media? Because they are usually 180 degrees out. The independent media is covering the things that matter to people, and the controlled media, which are the larger, most well-funded, is covering what they want you to hear, not what's really important.
Yeah.
Yeah, great point. So we mentioned I have a little quote here. With the rise of the Reagan era foreign policy of communist rollback, Sharp began promoting strategic nonviolence internationally through his Albert Einstein Institute. Sharp co-founded the Albert Einstein Institute with his former student, Peter Ackerman, who was simultaneously the right-hand man to the notorious corporate junk bond king, Michael Milken. And I don't know if you know about Michael Milken, but no. It was one of those financial scandals that there was CIA underpinnings to it as well. But
yeah, I was just a kid when that was coming down. I do remember a particular episode of Law and Order that had a Michael Milken-like figure in it. But yeah, he was the Burning Man Madoff of his day kind of thing.
The fact that if I'm trying to think of one of the more recent like financial crazy stories, but it's like being caught money laundering. That's what the Michael Milken thing was all about. It was like this massive corruption, financial. It was like hundreds of millions of dollars in the United States. And his right-hand man gets in bed with Gene Sharp to create a coup machine.
A coup machine.
That's what I call the Albert Einstein Institute. It was a coup machine.
Right.
And so
it is a coup machine.
you start looking at these players and you're like, wait a minute, why would a guy that is setting up this democracy coup machine be in bed with a guy that's really good at money laundering? Well, it makes perfect sense because that's how they use laundered drug money and weapon trafficking money and all this other stuff to fund these illicit activities. They donate them to these institutes because they're all privately funded, supposedly, and they're just basically money laundering operations to do coups around the world. And so it makes perfect sense that you'd have the guy that's the brainiac guy that's going to set up the democracy movements, which is overthrowing governments, and a guy that's very familiar with how to move the money around sitting side by side at the same institute. So I just found that very interesting. So
probably just a pure coincidence.
Yeah. During the 80s, 90s timeframe, they were all busy training activists and policymakers. They had seminars. They had defense leaders come in both to Harvard and to the Albert Einstein Institute, since it was all about democracy, training them. But what their real agenda was basically coups. And so they also were pushed very heavily by the IMF and the World Bank, their initiatives, because they're supposedly promoting democracy. And that's what, the IMF and the World Bank and all of these guys are supposedly all about. But that isn't what they were at all what they were about. But their best hire to do all of this stuff was none other than a guy by the name of Colonel Robert Helvey. Who was Colonel Robert Helvey? Well, he happened to have just been retiring from the National Defense Intelligence College. What do they do? Oh, well, they were working hand in hand with the U.S. Institute of Peace, which is actually...
A lot of Mike Benz talks about this. Apparently, because he was a political appointee at the State Department, and basically starts off as a speechwriter for Trump, and he kind of comes in, and he's like, wait, what is all this coup stuff doing here? I thought this was the State Department. Why do we have all this? And he starts getting invited to all these trainings, and he's like, what's going on here?
The U.S. Institute of War, and they're the ones that was recently raided, that had a cache of weapons in Washington, D.C. when the Doge team led by Elon Musk went and raided their building. They had a whole safe full of weapons at the Institute of Peace.
My God.
So
I remember hearing about that.
Colonel Helvey, his specialty in the military was special forces, regime change kind of things, psychological operations, all of that stuff. So again, here's this thing that's just, this nefarious or this non-nefarious looking thing called the Albert Einstein. I mean, we all love Albert Einstein, right? Institute, sitting in the northeast of the United States, and it's got all of these nefarious intelligence, special forces.
Yeah, let me just go on in here. So, based on reports regarding the Department of Government Efficiency taking over the U.S. Institute of Peace in March 2025, findings included loaded weapons found. Members of the Doge team claimed to have found loaded guns inside the U.S. IP headquarters located on Constitution Avenue. They broke into the building following a refusal by outgoing staff to vacate, leading to a standoff and eventual takeover of the building. Yeah, U.S. federal marshals, you need to leave. During the takeover, Doge officials reportedly ignored directions and walked toward the USP's IP's gun safe. Why do you have a gun safe there? I get it. Maybe you have security guards with guns with a gun safe, but this does not sound like that particular type of gun safe. While reports indicate this is just Google AI, so take it for what you will. Certainly surrounding items, while reports indicate loaded guns were found, the context was often part of a chaotic takeover. Staff questioning the legality of the actions of the new administration seeking to shut down the organization. It's a nonpartisan federal institution set up by Congress. Oh, yeah, she's going to cover into that. It's now the Donald J. Trump Institute of Peace. And a Doge employee was put in charge of the U.S. Institute of Peace. So she'll get into a bit more of that. So that does explain some of the stuff I've heard about it. So we'll get back into it. But I was just like, that's got to be. They had a whole cache of weapons. And like I said, I can see security guards having like a gun safe. But why do the rest of you have guns here?
Psychological, and this Gene Sharp guy that's running soft coups all over the world.
Wow. And the National Defense Intelligence College, in bed with the Peace Institute, which actually has a cache of arms. Do you know,
Yes.
Roxanne, just to a slight detour here, right? This sort of Orwellian doublespeak. In Britain, this government they want to put through legislation so that there are no jury trials if the conviction is for 3 years or less, if that's the sentence that you get if found guilty. And the Home Secretary, or the Justice Secretary, Home Secretary, he said in Parliament that this was designed to strengthen juries. What?
It's
But
because
okay.
you guys are running out of British citizens. Everybody else is there illegally.
Sorry, say that again?
I said you're running out of people to sit on juries.
Yes. Yes. But it's this Orwellian doublespeak to twist our heads, and then life doesn't make sense anymore and confuses us. Okay, so this Institute of Peace with cache of arms. Please carry on.
Okay, so they get the Institute of Peace gets money directly from Congress. So does another entity called the National Endowment for Democracy.
So minor context, Google's reporting that it was the gun safe for the security guards, and it was just handguns. So it's not quite as dramatic as, as you know. We found like 20 M16s and a bunch of rocket launchers. It's not raiding the gun store from Commando. So it was literally the security guards' gun safe. Okay, that makes sense. Sometimes you got to ask the AI the question the right way, I find.
Democracy, NED. You hear a lot of talk about that in the United States. Okay, most people don't understand that the National Endowment for Democracy, that's what the whole Albert Einstein, we're all about democracy. Most people don't understand that the National Endowment for Democracy has 4 pots of money. One is for Republicans.
Here's that bipartisan thing, right?
Called the International Republican Institute. One is for Democrats called the National Democrat Institute. One is for labor unions, and one is for the Chamber of Commerce. Now, what they do with this money is they fund things like the Albert Einstein Institute. The Albert Einstein Institute's largest actual donations that we can account for came from the Institute of Peace with their cache of weapons, the International Republican Institute, which John McCain was in charge of, by the way, for 25 years during the Maidan coup, funding Gene Sharp to be over there, boots on the ground, and the the NDI, the National Democrat Institute. So Gene Sharp was being paid by Republicans and Democrats and the Institute of Peace to do these regime overthrows overseas.
Okay. Now, just what motivates Gene Sharp? Ideology or money or mixture of both?
In many cases, again, they recruit people who have very unique personalities to run operations like this. I cannot find, he's not one of those people that have like 5 generations of skull and bones or, secret society ties or anything like that. He just is a very nefarious person. I don't know if I'm not a specialist in genealogy, but I don't know if other people can find, but generally these people are not 1 generation deep. Sure. Generally, their families go back several generations of being in operations like this.
Okay, but in Gene Sharp's case, would it be a fair assumption that he believed that he was doing this for the best, for the good of America, for the good of the Ukrainian people, so that they could have liberty, American style, or under the heel of the Americans. He didn't believe that.
No.
I'm just
As a
being
matter of
naive.
fact, here's a tidbit that I left out.
And he died just a little while ago. So he's died at age 90. But yeah, so I'm just looking him up on Google right now, and it's like, yeah, oh yeah, right livelihood. Gene Sharp was the world's 2018. So yeah, was the world's foremost expert on nonviolent revolution, has been described as the Machiavelli of nonviolence. And then of course some of these things were incredibly violent. So saying, oh yeah, it was nonviolent. Yeah, whatever, people.
1957, Gene Sharp, 29 years old, was the editor of the London-based newsletter called Peace News.
Okay.
Again, this is if you go back and you look at these intelligence operatives, right? Most of the ones in the United States have some education or experience in the city of London. And so that they basically kind of get sheep dipped into like this whole global cabal. And, you know, in my research, it's basically ran out of Washington, D.C. and the city of London. And so I found that an interesting tidbit that he had basically spent time in both of those places in the, you know, lead up to his creation of this Albert Einstein Institute. He also was in and out of Norway quite regularly, and he began graduate work at Oxford. And again, for us in America, it is not normal for people to go like either on a Rhodes Scholarship or whatever to Oxford University. So it's almost like it's a grooming.
Yeah, when I realized what the Rhodes Scholarship was doing, like the Romans before them, the British Empire have captured the American elite with the Rhodes Scholarship Program and other programs that are designed to mingle the British and ruling elite with the nouveau riche in America to have that kind of influence on them. And that is the purpose of the Rhodes Scholarship, like to capture the American elite and make them into carbon copies of themselves.
Track that they're put on to create these people. So obviously, during the time.
By what I meant by the Roman Empire is that the Romans would always bring in, demand the sons or daughters of kings from their conquests and bring them there, train them, raise them Roman, and then send them back home to run their homelands as a Roman would.
Time that he was in and out of or Norway, sorry. Norway had Gladio stay behind units already in it. Right. And obviously that was kind of a big deal because of where it's located in relation to the Soviet Union. And there were, I just started researching the U-2 program, and a lot of the U-2 overflights of the Soviet Union was out of Norway at the same time that Gene Sharp was there.
Okay, what was the U-2 program?
Oh, yes, he's going to get. We'll cover that, but I just did an interview with a guy named Richard Swank last Friday, I believe, and it was interesting. He worked on U-2s in South Korea. And he said the planes were very temperamental. Each one was basically unique. And the skunk work guys really just were there working with him and made it up. And I think people who want to know more about that kind of stuff, you should see him, watch that video. And I have to rename it in YouTube studio. I screwed that up. But Also, I'm looking to have a panel with him and my friend Kelly, who I also did a show a little while ago, more on Canada. And we're hoping to talk about the situation in Iran, because Kelly's got the naval. She used to date a merchant marine when she was younger, so she has this love of shipping. Richard has all the Air Force experience, and I, of course, come from the historical and intelligence perspective. So we're going to have a bit of a talk on Iran more tomorrow, looking likely 10:30 a.m. if people want to tune in.
The U-2 is a reconnaissance plane with a super duper camera on it that flies at 70,000 feet. And it's like this little wimpy plane. It literally, the wings could fall off if it went too slow or if it tilted the wrong way. But it was it was a CIA classified program that, let me turn that off, that was created in the 1950s. Deployed in the 1960s to do overflights of contested airspace, like over the Soviet Union, over China. I don't know if you remember the one U-2, Gary Powers, that was shot down over Russia. There was one that was shot down over Cuba during the Cuban Missile Crisis. It's just a very high flying, very slow plane that goes over and snaps a whole bunch of pictures.
Yeah, and the other thing was, like, the Soviets were really pissed off about that plane. They could see it coming in, and they were taking they basically built interceptor missiles capable of shooting it down because they were so annoyed by it. And also, like, what used to happen, the NSA would fly planes into the Soviet Union in the 40s and 50s, and I think even to the 60s, on secret missions to gather what other information. They would deliberately penetrate Soviet airspace. In the early days, I have Gregory Bamford's book on the NSA is a pretty good one about that. That's crazy stuff.
That we didn't even know that it existed for a very long time, although the UK supplied pilots for it while it was still classified. But anyway, Gene Sharp just happened to be there while this was going on in Norway, which I found very interesting. And so anyway, I wanted to get down here and just give you the name of a couple, because there's so much history of him.
Gary Eisenhower initially denied that the shoot down had happened because the CIA had assured him through Alan Foster Dulles, was like, oh, well, we give all our pilots suicide pills, so if they capture, he'll just commit suicide. Turns out Gary Powers wanted to live.
Being involved in all of these nefarious things and with the different nefarious people. But I want to get down to the more modern things that you would recognize as some of the operations that he had been involved in. I have so many notes on him. Let's see. Because there was a couple of, I should have had this highlighted.
Are you putting all this into a book or a Substack?
I have a whole bunch of Substacks written. I don't have one on him in particular, but I definitely need to because he's somebody I talk about a lot. There's a few people in this Operation Gladio that I actually refer to as the Forrest Gump of Gladio because they show up all the time.
Right.
Over and over, like at every place, depending on the time period, there's these certain people, and Gene Sharp is one of them, as well as his, gosh, I didn't realize I had so many notes on him. That's crazy. Okay, so there was an organization called in Georgia, the country of Georgia, that was called the Center of Applied Nonviolence, Action, and Strategies. It was referred to as Canvas. And this is in the early 2000s. They began with the concepts of American Gene Sharp agenda, but they were based on the revolution in Serbia. And so they used Georgian youth activists that translated into Enough. That was their the name. It's obviously a Russian name, but it translates into Enough. And you had the Albert Einstein Institute over there getting money from Republicans and Democrats through the National Endowment for Democracy. Mm-hmm. They were getting money from the American Peace Institute, and they were getting money from George Soros's Open Society Institute. And there were, they basically were orchestrating the boots on the ground in order to ensure during the election, in order to overthrow the government. They actually even produced a film that was called Bringing Down a Dictator. So they're into the whole propaganda thing, like literally pulling out all of the strings. There was another one. Okay, so Canvas was also involved in Venezuela with Hugo Chavez in the early 2000s, like 2004, 2005. And they also got involved in the Juan Guaido 2019 attempted coup of Maduro. Yeah. So this isn't like, an old, it's been around for decades, but they're actively involved in this stuff. They worked hand in hand with USAID in Venezuela.
I remember watching Blaine Holt on you don't watch Blaine Holt, you listen to him. And he was talking about how he was down in like Colombia doing some operations. And he's like, hey, you guys need any help with USAID? Like, you need to put any wells in here? I can get some of my guys going out and make wells for you. That'll be great. And the USAID director is like, no, I don't need your help in anything. It's like, but you're doing all these children. He's like, no. And then he's like, later in life, like, oh God, they were doing not good stuff.
And could they have worked recently in Romania, and could they be working in Hungary? In Hungary yes. Currently?
Yes.
Yes, they are.
That's exactly what they do. That's right. Exactly what now it's hard to find the video proof of them doing it. But if you look at Romania, if you look at Hungary, and you look at, there was one more.
Serbia, Belarus. I think there were demonstrations in Serbia very recently.
I think it was Serbia. I think you're right. Slovakia. In Slovakia,
okay. Because Fico, he's a bit independent.
Yeah.
Yes, a lot of these people are independent. We can't have independence around here, except for the fact that we're probably going to see, I think Trump's going to pull out of NATO by the end of his term. I think that's going to happen. And in the EU is also going to be like, I see that splitting up 2 or 3 different ways right now. They're already lost one country, but technically, and I know Labor's interested in getting back in, but they're not. They know that they'd need to run another referendum, and they'd probably lose that one, even bigger numbers.
Yes, maybe 2 independent.
That's right. We can't be having that.
No,
he doesn't want. He doesn't want the war. He doesn't want Slavs carrying on killing Slavs. He doesn't want to fund that enterprise like Orban.
Correct. And so those are exactly the targets for a guy for the Gene Sharp activist. Obviously, he's now dead, but the Albert Einstein Institute of Peace continues on. And they're just one of many. He is one of the bigger ones as far as the ties back to Henry Kissinger and Harvard and Brzezinski and all of those guys. But he is not isolated. There's many of these organizations that exist, and they fly under the radar because people don't understand how this whole big picture works.
Okay. And then, because also I'm just thinking about Burkina Faso. I've done quite a few videos on what Ibrahim Traore is doing in Burkina Faso, and there was an attempt on his life
Yeah.
a few weeks ago, which was by students or militant Islamic, so-called Islamic militants.
Yeah.
And I wonder if they would have been involved in that because,
So generally speaking, when it's actually a violent one, that's not these guys.
Yeah,
These guys are basically just the jackboots. They're the brown shirts. They all get killed at the end of the story.
Yeah, that's what happened to the little brown shirts. The guys running Germany, Hindenburg, and the generals said, "Okay, we're willing to sign on for your little project here, Hitler, but you got to get rid of these brown shirts
because they know too much." But when it's actually going to be an assassination attempt, they don't tend to use this type of a program. That's kind of you've moved from the kind of the jackboot operation to the paramilitary operation, which is really a gladio. Now, obviously in Burkina Faso, they're going to have people, because the CIA had been in there for a long time before the current setup. They're going to have people to contact. They're going to have networks in there. Whether or not, I think at this point, anybody's brave enough, because if they find out anybody's, his security is so good that you're going to be instantly turned into pink mist if you get anywhere near that man. And I applaud everything he's doing. He is trying to restore a country, and he's proving the entire world that has for decades, since the mid 1950s and early 60s, when most of the African countries got their independence under false pretense.
Yeah. When I learned about the French and African lira, I was like, are you kidding me? Not even the British are being that awful. The British just going around causing civil wars everywhere. But having control of some other countries' literal currency, oh my God.
In my opinion, because they were never allowed to be independent. Patrice Lumumba is the example of that. Very well educated, very, very charismatic leader that could have changed the world in Africa had he been allowed to maintain the prime minister. But he was not controlled by the West, and they could not exploit the resources. And so they assassinated him. And that's kind of the go-to narrative, that if you try to be too independent in Africa, you are going to be on the chopping block as far as the West is concerned. And so I wish him all the, because he is one of the very few people that can finally establish that you can lead an African country to prosperity if you are allowed to do it and not assassinated by.
Yeah, he's the West African Nasser. And so Nasser was able to maneuver himself into that kind of position by playing off both sides. Egypt got a bit of prosperity out of it. But of course, the current guy is not doing the greatest ever. But it's Egypt. He's got like a huge overpopulation of people who can't get out of the trap, because one of the big problems, my father and I discussed this with a friend of mine once, and they said, and my father was like, the number one reason the West can be so prosperous is we have legal ownership of land. And a lot of these countries don't have that kind of thing. They do not have land registries like we do that allow us to transfer property and that kind of stuff around in the way that, and that's just not in their system or in their culture. And because that kind of thing doesn't exist, they run into problems like we see here.
Western oligarchs that want to monopolize your resources.
Yep. Okay. And I've done quite a few videos on Burkina Faso and Ibrahim Traore and what he's doing there, and hopefully I'll do some more, and we'll talk about coverage of Patrice Lumumba.
Yeah,
Uh,
it's a fascinating story
yeah,
of
we'll see what we'll.
Spyguy.
I have an idea for that. We'll talk about that offline and see what we can work out. Right. So people should subscribe, comment, and like. Now, there are some countries like Russia and China that throw out people like Gene Sharp. How do they find out about people like Gene Sharp to throw them out?
Well, I think from an intelligence perspective, the the idea that Operation Gladio exists and that there are these stay behind units that are inserted into country, it's a very well known fact. We just don't know about it. All of the countries know about it, both the ones that have been overthrown in the government and the ones doing the overthrowing. They all know about it. They know how this whole thing works. And that's why, Putin was very wise to throw out USAID and all of these other ridiculous organizations that go in and destabilize their country. So it is not an unknown thing at that level. It's an unknown thing for us.
Right. Now, could it be that Russia and China and Iran and other countries, the axis of evil, Burkina Faso even,
Mm.
are using these sorts of tactics against us in the West, against Britain? Please, please do it against Britain.
I do say that if there's any Muslim country we need to go and overthrow that has nuclear weapons, it is Great Britain.
And
No, I
remove
don't
this
think
government.
so.
Why?
So,
Why aren't they doing it to us?
well, because there's a lot of reasons. Number one, we have been led to believe that they are something they're not. Russia has no interest at all in being in control of the world. These guys do. He is satisfied with being in control of Russia and making Russia great.
Yeah, making Russia great again. Also, he's interested in the north-south transportation corridor, which is Tashkent, Uzbekistan, and all the things. And I say that to people like, you think he wants to take over Europe? No, he wants to take care of all the stands because that's the future of Russia, not Europe, not kind of China, but the stands, making that happen and making all those former Soviet republics into a cultural thing. That's the future for Russia, and we never even talk about that kind of thing.
Now you could.
One of the reasons I'm planning on my Euro trip the way I am is that I want to see the stands for myself and. Pakistan. I don't want to go to Pakistan or Afghanistan. I'll stick to other ones. But I've heard so many stories from people like that Pepe Escobar when he was still less. I don't want to say less crazy, but just like a lot of the people that you could used to use for sources on these things have completely, as Tom Luongo would say, crashed out over the Iran war and other things, and they just have this very anti-West or anti-US sentiment because they're so used to the previous empire. And it's not that way it's going. We're seeing things change.
Probably say that China, with their use of Chinese people in countries, may have some network like that. You could probably make.
Yeah, there's definitely Canada does have. There was like 6 writings that have been influenced by the Chinese. Someone said Markham Unionville. Markham Unionville is not the ones the Chinese are, the communist Chinese are running. Markham Unionville is full of Hong Kong refugees and the Kuomintang. That's where all and like weird religious versions of Chinese. Like my friend there is the riding president, and he's run the campaign provincially twice now, and he's just like, this is not, it's not what you think it is. There is another riding, I can't remember which one it was, but it's controlled by, it's literally known as the Communist Party riding, and you just don't give that guy any sensitive position. You can make him like Minister of Transportation, Minister of Transportation or anything like that, but he's not going to be given He's like a parliamentary assistant at the federal level, I think. But you don't give those guys sensitive informations.
Make that argument. I think Iran, in my opinion, has been a vassal state of a bigger destabilization in the Middle East op between it and Israel for a very long time. I think if you go back and you look at the relationships with the CIA and MI6 and Mossad with Iran during the 80s after the Ayatollah came to power, there's lots of ties to Iran. I think it's part of a strategy of tension where anytime they need to control anything in the Middle East, they just use Iran or Israel. And you have this, spat between the two. There's
every time they need to make some money, right?
Lot of material there to substantiate that. So it's an interesting thing. But what I found out that I did not know about China is for the first 40 years after World War II, we had set up a Chinese general by the name of Chiang Kai-shek in Taiwan. On the island was originally called Formosa. And after we brought Chiang Kai-shek to Formosa, we changed the name to Taiwan and then pretended like it was its own country when it had always been a Chinese island with a Chinese general sitting on it. But somehow that's now going to be recognized as the leader of China, not mainland China and Mao, because we don't like Mao. And so for the next 40 years, Chiang Kai-shek had declared martial law immediately upon his arrival in Taiwan. He ruled the island with his KMT army. He just changed the shingle outside the KMT headquarters and called it a political party as opposed to a military. And it became the political party, again, talking about democracy. And then you had General MacArthur come and testify to Congress saying, oh, no, that's a democracy. That's a political party. That's not a military.
MacArthur said that was democracy. They ruled. They've only had free and fair elections since he died. Chiang Kai-shek died. That's not a democracy. It's the same thing with the Koreans. South Korea for a long time was not a democracy.
While that military is going all along the border of southern China, launching attacks into mainland China consistently for like the next 35 years. Yeah. Not only that, the CIA and Taiwan took a whole bunch of Tibetans out of Tibet, flew them into all kinds of areas, Singapore, the Philippines, and gave them guerrilla training. Saipan, they took them to Saipan and was training them to be guerrillas, to insert them back into basically a stay-behind army into Tibet. They even flew them to Colorado Springs, United States, took them to a World War II base, trained them to be guerrillas, and then inserted them back into China in Tibet.
Makes a lot of sense. You would want to have them there because Colorado, as I've said, is a lot like a lot of these places. So Colorado is very much like Afghanistan and Tibet. People keep thinking these places are like deserts and it's like, and it's Iraq. No, a lot of these places are very mountainous terrain. Afghanistan is much more like Colorado. And that's probably why it makes it, I wouldn't be surprised if they make a lot of the Afghanistan war movies there.
To fight the Chinese army. And we did the exact same thing with the Uyghurs in Nepal. So there's a lot of very interesting misinformation out there about China and why China would be pissed off at the United States, because basically for 40 years, we were at war with China. Just not an overt war, a very covert war.
Now, is that still going on under the Trump regime, these sorts of operations?
No. I've not seen any of them. Now, are there covert operations? I'm sure there are. We don't find out. That's the problem.
Yeah, like the Institute of Peace is now being run by one of the Elon Musk Doge people. So yeah, I guess they're not doing it anymore.
Problem with all of this, we don't find out until 30 years later when stuff is declassified what exactly is going on, and that's a real problem if you live in a democracy. The democracy that none of us is allowed to know anything about.
But yes, but we can't complain because it is for our own good.
Yes.
as they tell us.
Obviously, that's what they told us about the shot for COVID too. It was
Right.
for
Yes,
our own
for our own good. It's all for our own good. Aren't we lucky? And Roxanne, I am lucky to have you on and discuss all this and share all this information. And I'll have your X link in the description below where people can find you. And what's the name of your Substack, please?
It's the Colonel's Corner. Same
The
thing on Rumble.
The Colonel's Corner on Rumble and on Substack. Links in the description below. Let us know in the comments. Have you heard about Gene Sharp? Are there others like him that you've heard about? Please hype.
Yep, and that's kind of it for today's show. So I thought I'd like to share that out and give my commentary, as always, on these kind of things. If you like this kind of stuff, like, share, and subscribe. I'm going to upload some of these videos to my locals, which I haven't been doing because, it kind of defunct. But if anyone actually wanted to support me, I have a locals page where I charge like $5 a month or whatever. It is the Spyguy at locals.com. So I have that there. I was very early adopter of that when I was still trying to make this channel thing during COVID. And then I got back to work. And now that I'm not working right now, it's kind of my outlet to the world for the day. I have other things. I do these Zoom calls with people, which are fun, and get a lot of information from them. And that's where I'm getting some of my guests from. And I'm going to be definitely bringing more people on from that community to interview on various subjects that are not always necessarily Spyguy related. But I just like doing the interview format and like introducing new people and new sources of information to people. So with that being said, what it is my Grok? Oh, I killed the Grok script. So agents, be careful out there, and be sure to like, share, and subscribe. Thank you for watching and joining today. I had 2 whole viewers. Sadly, one of them dropped off, but did watch for a while. Oh, I did say I had like 780 YouTube hours. I was wrong. I had 78. I misread the 0. But still 100 hours is better than what I have now, which is better than a kick in the head. So the more I do this, the more hours I get, and hopefully more people will watch and share. And I might be doing another stream later tonight. Still not too sure about that with my friend Owen, but just talking news of the day and what's going on in the world. Thanks. Bye-bye.